Welcome to Around the Weird. Here's your host, the museum curator of the strange and unusual, Mr. Nothing.
Thank you, mysterious voice, and welcome back to Around the Weird, a booktube channel where I talk about all the unusual and out of the ordinary literature that I have found in my travels. Today, I want to talk about not a singular book, but I want to do my usual wrap-up and TBR that comes at the end of every month and the beginning of another. For June, it's been a bit subpar. I can say that there were some things that I expected to be pretty good and weren't, and others that were just like they weren't really that great, and they weren't bad by any means, but they were just very middling. I feel like that's especially the case with my random library reads, which is unfortunate. I think in terms of like just the random reads, just random books, like last year was far better than this year, and I don't know what exactly is causing that. But a lot of the stuff that you find on library shelves isn't really up to quality, so that is unfortunate. And then there's also the comic books that I find, and I really think that to some extent I might have read all the decent comic books already, or like the highly proclaimed stories, and then there's just other ones that are just existing that aren't nearly as good as, say, Batman's The Long Halloween, or Alison Bechdel's comic book or graphic novel memoir, which is unfortunate, but that's certainly something I could address. Like I could take action by just getting some ringers, just finding books that I know have been high quality and reading those instead. And I'd be in for a good time and whatnot, and it'd be like, oh, I read these were the good books and whatnot. But I feel like if I do that, I miss out on the sort of random, not in the mainstream kind of stories that are hanging about the library, that may not have garnered high praise, but they're still pretty good, and in some cases great, like with Burning by Megha Majumdar last year. I probably wouldn't have read that if I hadn't visited my local library. So it's a bit of a weird situation that I find myself in, but hopefully in July I read even more high quality books. That'll remain to be seen though. But without further ado, let's talk about the wrap-up and the TBR. I will, of course, do the wrap-up first, followed by the TBR, and we will move on from there. So for June, what books did I read? Well, I read Neverwhere by Neil Gaiman, which I thought was so-so. It was kind of underwhelming in that the story felt very basic, and it wasn't what Neil Gaiman has proved himself to do like in his career. Like I think of like Stardust or American Gods, and I'm like, wow, Neil Gaiman could have done a lot better than this very subpar adventure story. Like there are interesting ideas and like a hidden mythology kind of thing that is a Neil Gaiman trademark, but it's not of the same quality as the other things that he's written. And there's a reason why. This was like the second book that he had ever written. Whereas before he had written like Good Omens with Terry Pratchett, and then a whole bunch of comic books, which isn't nearly the same. So like American Gods wouldn't come for 4 years later. So it's more of a point where he started out, which is an interesting point, but it's not. If you want some excellent Neil Gaiman work, you're better with sticking with his later catalog. I also read Spy X Family, which was some manga. It was pretty good. I really liked the nonsense story and the very interesting characters and art. Probably the best of the month in terms of what I read for books. And I'm looking forward to reading the rest of the series as soon as I get to that. And then I read Last Orders by Graham Swift, which is just a story about a group of friends who were going through the last orders of their friend who had died. It was mad. Like it wasn't bad, but it didn't stand out to me. And that was a random library selection. So unfortunately, it was also by another British author, and I'm getting this grand opinion or something that British authors just can't wow me the way that I hope they can, because a lot of the random library reads that have come from British authors have been in styles and in stories that just haven't really stood out to me in a way, and that is unfortunate. I also read Scott Pilgrim Volume 6, Scott Pilgrim versus the Universe, which I thought was okay. The entire series is just okay. Unfortunately, I don't think it holds up very well compared to other comic books, and it also comes off like it's trying too hard to be edgy, and it's relying on like queer baiting tropes and all of that, and the humor of the time is very dated. So I think if it's worth checking out the first volume maybe, but not going through the whole series. And then I also read Cal Penn's You Can't Be Serious, which was for a book club thing. I thought it was fine. It seemed like Cal Penn wasn't really willing to go too in-depth in his own story. Like, he presented a lot of interesting ideas that merited more attention. And it's kind of obvious how he kind of was superficial with this memoir, given that last month I had read Crying in H Mart by Michelle Zauner, and she went into more detail and was willing to be or more open with her emotions and with the things that had gone on in her life. And Cal Penn, like, he's gone through a lot, but it felt like he was talking about something, moving on. Like, he comes out as gay in this memoir, but it's not really a big deal, and it's also just casually mentioned. Like, this is a man who dealt with extreme racism and was also like gay during a time when maybe you couldn't be that in Hollywood, or you'd be like typecasted in certain roles. And like that never comes up in his memoir. It just seems like it's just another thing that happened to him, which is interesting because, you know, maybe that's where it needs to be. But it's still very weird that he just casually mentions that here. And then I also read The Backstagers, Volume 1 by James Tinian IV, which was okay. Like, I don't think there's any more volumes to this, so I think this was just the first one, and then it was so bad, or not bad, but so subpar that it never really, they never went forward with additional volumes, at least as far as I can see. It's just okay. Like, it's a fun story, but I feel like with what it's trying to do, there have been other comics that have sort of told that story or gathered that atmosphere more effectively. And then I also read Bridge to Terabithia by Catherine Patterson, which I thought was solid. That might have been the best of the month if I hadn't also read Spy Family. I really liked the discussion of gender norms and the friendship that was built over the course of the story. And then, of course, the ending, which hits you very hard, regardless of what age you are, I think. I thought it was a very good story, and I can definitely see why it won the Newbery Award. So if you're interested in those kinds of stories like I am, you might want to check that out. I also read a story called Good News, which was a post-apocalyptic sort of Western that I got from my local library. Again, it wasn't that good. The story was kind of nonsense at times, and it felt like the author was trying too hard to be fancy or something like that. And it reminded me a little too much of Cormac McCarthy's works, although this comes before Cormac McCarthy was really writing, Blood Meridian or The Road. But like it's given what I know about Cormac McCarthy and his writing, like it seemed like this was trying to be that, but not fully executing it, not really having the chaos or the grit on display there that Cormac McCarthy writes so well. So it felt a little off to me. And then I'm currently reading, like this technically counts for June, but it's not going to come out till July, The Last Temptation of Christ by Nikos Kazantzakis, which I think is pretty good. There are a number of problems, of course, that I have with this, but it is by far head and shoulders above everything else that I've been reading as of late. And this is what I've been talking about with the needing to find those ringers. Because this is the one of the first book since I think I want to say Lolita by Vladimir Nabokov, where I feel like I've been challenged as I've been reading. And so, that's pretty high praise. But again, there are a number of things that I do want to talk about that maybe aren't so good about this book, but you can look forward to that pretty soon, probably after this video comes out. I also read a number of short stories for the month of June, including The Crack by Joyce Carol Oates, probably the best of the month. Really loved the how the story was written, as well as the twist ending, which is pretty fascinating. I hadn't read Joyce Carol Oates before this, but I am glad that I have now. And then I also read The Call of Cthulhu by H.P. Lovecraft, which is a lot of fun. If you're interested in the Cthulhu mythos, or you just like scary short stories, this might be something that you look into. Also read The Other Side of the Hedge by E.M. Forrester, which I thought was pretty good. Again, his writing was pretty solid there, and I loved how he explored religion and life and death and those kinds of ideas. And then I also read After One by Myra Goldberg. I thought it was okay, but mostly forgettable. I'm probably not going to remember it in the long term. It'll be one of those short stories where I find myself forgetting about it as time goes on. Not necessarily bad, but not something that grabs your attention as much as, say, The Crack or The Other Side of the Hedge. I also read a number of poems for the month of June. And mostly they were LGBTQA themed poems from those types of authors, because it is this period of Pride, and that will continue through the month of July. So go check out my Poetry Thursday videos in the playlist that I have if you're curious about learning about those poets in more detail. So what do I plan on reading for July? A quick note, I will be attending a conference as a part of work in Portland in mid-July. So the number of books, the number of short stories, and the number of poems that I get to probably won't be as much as usual. In fact, I think I'm just going to take that entire week off. I could probably like make the videos on like a Sunday and like post them online ahead of time, but I think I'm just gonna like focus on the conference mostly. So there will still be those videos out, but just not during that particular week, which is like the week of the 17th. But I'm very much looking forward to this conference, as it's like the first one that my work is paid for. So I get to talk with other disability specialists from around the country and learn a bit more about what they are doing. But in terms of what I plan on reading for the month of July, for books, I do want to read Quarantine Princess by Meg Cabot, which again, I've been putting off. And also, it's a bit weird for me to say that, given I've been talking about how books have been boring mostly lately. But I should let you know, like even though Meg Cabot's writing is bad at times, and like the Princess Diaries series was not overall good, it is by no means boring. Like, it is a very exciting, very fun book. It might not be the most profound literature or even like the deepest or anything like that, but Meg Cabot knows how to write an exciting book, which is something we have to give her credit for. And then also I want to read Evicted, which is a Bevan recommendation that I haven't quite gotten to, but I should get to that by early July. A number of library reads, including reads from my local bookstore. I have the next 2 volumes of Berserk lined up, and I'm very much looking forward to reading those. I also want to read Leg, the story of a body or a brain that grew a leg or something like that, by Greg Marshall. This is a Bevan Book Club recommendation. Hopefully it is much more high quality than Cal Penn's You Can't Be Serious, because that was kind of basic, kind of uneventful. It is Disability Awareness Month in July, which is very relevant to me. So hopefully this is another story that is on quality as, say, Judy Humans Becoming Human, which I read a couple of years ago. I also want to read a story by H.G. Wells called The Sleeper Awakes. That's been on my larger TBR for some time, but I haven't really gotten to those, and I feel like a lot of my time has been freed up based on this much larger TBR, or like based on getting to the other books in my TBR. So I feel I have time to finally get to that larger list. So The Sleeper Awakes should be interesting. It is about a man who falls asleep and wakes up in the future. It should be interesting, given that it is, of course, H.G. Wells. I really enjoyed The War of the Worlds. This probably isn't like that, but if it has a similar writing, it should be a hoot. And then I also want to read some more Shakespeare, so I'm going to try to read Othello, which is a play that I read part of in high school, but I don't think I read all of it. So it'll be interesting to go through it and see more about Desdemona and Othello and other such characters, because of course this is clearly a comedy, right, and not a tragedy. Definitely no bad things happen in Othello. There are a number of short stories that I want to get to, but two in particular. One of them is Brokeback Mountain by Annie Proulx, which was later made into the Academy Award-winning movie. But I didn't realize that it was a short story, so I want to check that out. And then a short story by Susan Glaspell. I've read a short story about from her before, A Jury of Her Peers, which is actually one of my most viewed videos. I think mostly because it is something that is recommended in high school and middle school literature classes. It's a story that has a pretty clear message and is easy to sort of evaluate and analyze. So that's probably why students or teachers recommend it to their students. So I look forward to reading more from her, especially because I really enjoyed her writing when I read A Jury of Her Peers. So be on the lookout for that. And then I have a number of poems planned. I do want to finish this month off with LGBTQA poets, as I was talking about before, through the mid-May to the end of July. Always exciting, and it's good to talk about LGBTQA poets outside of June, because corporations just limit their discussion to June, if they do that anymore. And then after July, I won't be focusing so much on LGBTQA poets, but I still might encounter them as I go through my travels, because I feel if one genre of writing attracts the most people from that spectrum, it's probably poetry. Because it's all about talking about what you feel and what you see in the world. Anyway, so that was my wrap up and my TBR for the month of July. I should point out that in June I did watch RRR and talked about it with Lucas over at the Bits of Lit. That was a lot of fun. And in July we are watching Ghost in a Shell, which is something that he really wanted to watch. So again, be on the lookout for that. If you have anything to comment or you want to make any recommendations for me, do so in the comments below. Let's have a discussion about books and whatnot. Otherwise, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so that more people can find out about these books or possibly these movies if they don't already know and they want to find out about that. And also join the Discord if you want to keep the discussion going in another forum. But until then, I wish you the best of luck in your weird and conference going to travels in July. Farewell.